What's happening, everyone? I'm James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, I'm going to take a look at the Robert Whittaker Paulo Costa fight slated for UFC 284 February 11th. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Those things really do help out this channel a lot, and I'd really appreciate it. If you haven't watched the show before, basically I go through a bunch of stats, a bunch of intangibles, and then at the end I give you my preview and pick. They may or may not have an effect on the fight, but we just like to look at everything here on Early Look. So that's kind of the way we roll. Again, this is going to be part of that studded UFC 284 card, which is taking place at the RAC Arena in Perth, Western Australia. Got to mention the obvious here. At the time of recording this fight isn't 100% official on Paulo Costa's end, although Robert Whittaker did do an interview on Submission Radio yesterday saying the fight's on, so we'll just assume it is. And even if it isn't, this is just an awesome fight to preview anyways on paper. These are two of the best middleweights, so regardless of what happens, this is still a fun fight to preview, and I don't feel like I'm wasting my time here because I think it's such an awesome matchup. Let's have a quick look at the tail of the tape here. Whittaker, the former middleweight champion, Paulo Costa, former middleweight title challenger. The Reaper is 24-6, Paulo Costa 14-2, 32 years old to 31, 6 feet tall to 6'1", 73.5 to 72. Doesn't get much better than this. Again, this is a super awesome matchup, and this has definitely got fight of the night written all over it. Let's start first with the former middleweight champion, Robert Whittaker, and we'll go through some of the stuff with him. So, Robert Whittaker, you can see there, 24-6. He's the number 2 ranked middleweight. He's got 9 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 10 decisions. He is 31 years old at the time of recording this. It's December 16th. Whittaker's actually going to be turning 32 next week, December 20th. So keep that in mind. He's 6 feet tall with a 73.5 inch reach. So he'll have about a 1.5 inch reach advantage in this fight. Whittaker was the Tough Smashes welterweight winner. He's a BJJ black belt. He's a former UFC middleweight champion, like I mentioned there. He's the first Australian UFC champion. Whittaker's got fight of the night 5 times against Clint Hester, Derek Brunson, Yoel Romero 2 times, and Calvin Gastelum. He's got performance of the night 3 times against Brad Tavares, Derek Brunson, and Ronaldo Jacare Souza. You look at it here, Whittaker did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros in March of 2009. You can see there, didn't make his UFC debut until December 2012. Whittaker is 15-4 in the UFC. He has 5 finishes in his career. Some notable wins that Whittaker's had in his career. We got to mention some of the obvious ones. Uriah Hall, that was a very good win at the time. Derek Brunson, finished Brunson in the first round. Very good win there. Jacare Souza, again, fight he finished. Looked great in that one. Yoel Romero, the 2 wins. Both decisions. We'll talk about how close some of those fights were in a second, but we got to mention those as well. You know, again, this is a guy that, you know, fought Romero twice. A lot of people don't want to fight Yoel Romero, right? Darren Till, that was a good win at the time, although seeing what Till's done since then, maybe not, but still got to mention Darren Till. Jared Cannonier, very good win in that fight. Calvin Gastelum defeating him. And then most recently, I think one of the best performances he's had in his career, absolutely dominating Marvin Vettori. That was a very good win for him. Again, a lot of risk there with both guys. Both guys highly ranked middleweights. Whittaker went out there getting a pretty decisive decision in that one. As far as Whittaker's losses, he had a few at welterweight in the UFC anyways. Court McGee losing a split decision there. Losing to Stephen Thompson. That's one of the only times he's been, it is the only time he's been finished in the UFC at welterweight. So that was a loss there, although I think we know now the weight cut may have been too much for that. And then the only other 2 losses he's had is he's had 2 losses to Adesanya at middleweight. One of them was a knockout, which I think we know. You know, I remember after that fight, people were saying, oh, Whittaker, the chin's declining, all this stuff. Well, he hasn't been knocked out since then, and I think he just had an off night in that one. So losing to Adesanya there. And then the second Adesanya fight, very close. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about some of the scorecards he's had in his career. But again, a very good fight against Adesanya at UFC 271 earlier this year. Whittaker has had a few injuries and he's missed some time here. We're going to go through these right now. So if you look at going all the way back, I think people forget that Whittaker was supposed to fight Luke Rockhold in February of 2018. Whittaker having an injury in that one. Whittaker was then supposed to fight Calvin Gastelum at UFC 234. He had that hernia thing. Like, remember, like, I think it was hours before the fight. That was pretty crazy. And that, of course, led to the Adesanya and Gastelum fight, which was one of the best fights ever. I love that one. I was supposed to fight Jared Cannonier back in March of 2020. Had an issue there. I think that was the one where he was kind of burnt out. So he's just like, hey, UFC, give me a break here, which I don't fault Whittaker for that. Anyone talking crap on Whittaker about that, don't got any time for you. That's pretty crazy. You talk crap about Whittaker there needing, not getting burnt out. And then obviously the Marvin Vettori fight that's supposed to take place in June that there was an injury there to Whittaker, so they didn't end up fighting until September. So just keep that in mind as well. As far as layoffs, Whittaker's had a few there. We'll start first with the first Yoel Romero fight to the second Yoel Romero fight. You look at it there, Romero 1 to Romero 2, so 2017 there to the UFC 225 fight. There's a 336-day layoff. Going from Romero to Adesanya, there was a 483-day layoff, so big layoff there. Going from Adesanya to Till, there was a 294-day layoff. Going from Jared Cannonier to Calvin Gastelum, there was a 301-day layoff. And then going from the most recent fight he had against Marvin Vettori to Paulo Costa, there was there's going to be a 161-day layoff. So actually one of the least amount of layoffs he's had going into a fight is going into this one. So again, fighting in September, fighting in February, not too bad there. Okay, as far as fights, Whittaker's had, close fights, I should say, Whittaker's had a few. We'll start with the Court McGee fight at UFC Fight Night 27. That was back in August of 2013. Going back and looking at the media scorecards, and again, you can go to MMAdecisions.com to see past media scorecards for their fights. So again, August 2013, 8 media members scored the fight for, actually, I got to go double check that. I think I wrote this down wrong in my notes here, but we'll go look at it in real time here, shall we? So if you look at, if you go to MMA Decisions here and you look at the Court McGee fight, where are we here? See this? Oh, McGee defeats Whittaker. There we go. Okay. So if you look at it here, you'll see the majority did feel like McGee won the fight. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 media members scoring it for McGee, 1 media member scoring it a draw. And then there was 4 who scored it for Whittaker. So we got to bring that up just because, again, you might look at that, say, oh, Whittaker had a lot of problems at welterweight, but that was, again, a fight where some people felt like he should have got the nod in that one. And then probably the most notable Whittaker close fight, well, there's actually a couple, but this was one for sure, was the split decision win over Romero at UFC 225. So I went back and looked at that. That was in July of 2018. 4 media members scoring the fight for Whittaker, 8 scoring it a draw, and 15 scoring it for Romero. So again, some people felt like he should have lost that fight. If he does lose that fight, then we're getting Romero and Adesanya next, and Whittaker's not getting that fight. So kind of interesting how that one went. So a lot of people feeling like Romero did enough to win that fight. The Robert Whittaker Darren Till fight, I thought Whittaker clearly won, but again, went back and watched that fight that was on UFC on ESPN 14 back in July of 2020. 10 media members scoring the fight for Whittaker, 10 media members scoring the fight for Till. So that's kind of interesting. Some people feeling like Till should have got the nod in that one. And then the most famous one, the one that I still get people messaging me about because I did think that Adesanya won that, and people are like, no way, you don't know how scoring works. UFC 271 earlier this year, February 2022, UFC 271. I went back and looked at the media scorecards there. 20 media members scoring the fight for Adesanya, 5 scoring it for Whittaker. So again, very close fight, but still only 5 media members scoring the fight for Robert Whittaker. So just keep that in mind here, all you people who said it was a robbery. Only 5 media members felt like he did enough to win. So there you go. That is everything you need to know about the Reaper, the former middleweight champion, Robert Whittaker. Let's get to his opponent, Paulo Costa, one of the most interesting fighters in the UFC, the Eraser. He is 14-2. He's got 11 knockouts, 1 submission, and 2 decisions. He's the number 6 ranked middleweight. He is 31 years old. He'll be turning 32 in April. He's 6'1" with a 72.5-inch reach. So I went back and did the math on this one. These two are very close in age. There's a 122-day difference in terms of when they were born. So Whittaker was born in December, and then Costa was born in the following April. So there's only 122 days. Costa's only 122 days younger than Whittaker, and Paulo Costa is only going to have a 1-inch height advantage, the reach advantage going to Whittaker in this fight. Costa is a BJJ black belt, trains at Fight Ready, and also trains out at Team Borishina, as you can see there. He's got Performance of the Night 2 times against Gareth McClellan and Uriah Hall. He's got Fight of the Night 2 times against Yoel Romero and Luke Rockhold being his last fight. If you go back and look here, Paulo Costa, just like his opponent, did not have any amateur fights. He went straight to the pros in February of 2012. And Whittaker, by that time, so by the time Costa made his professional MMA debut, Whittaker already had 9 fights. Now, if you go to his UFC debut, which was back in March of 2017, Whittaker had 10 UFC fights at the time. So again, Whittaker going into this one, having more experience than Paulo Costa, just one thing to kind of note here. Again, take it or leave it if you want. Paulo Costa is 6-2 in the UFC. He's got 4 finishes. Some notable wins include former welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks, although let's call it like it is. Hendricks was definitely on a decline at that point. I think the UFC kind of did him a favor. Yoel Romero, that was a very good win at the time. Close fight, but again, people felt like Costa did enough to win in that one. And then his most recent win over Luke Rockhold. But again, I think Rockhold, he's coming out of retirement for that fight. A lot of people look at that fight differently. I don't want to sound like a hater here, but I did not enjoy that fight. I didn't think it was that technically great. I mean, it was kind of like, just like a wild sort of bar fight, but I didn't think it was that good. And to be honest, I think it was a missed opportunity for Costa to make some noise. I thought for sure Costa was going to knock out Rockhold, with Rockhold being knocked out so many times in his career, and he wasn't able to do it. So, you know, again, it's a notable win in the sense that he beat a former middleweight champion, but the Luke Rockhold that was in that fight is nowhere close to the Luke Rockhold that was in his prime. I think we got to mention that. Some notable losses here for Costa. Vettori, he lost that one. That was the weird fight where he's like, hey, let's just fight it light heavyweight, right? Like, midway through the week, sure, why not? It's the main event. The UFC's kind of handcuffed. We got to do it at light heavyweight. So he ended up losing that one, although that was a better fight, I thought, in terms of entertainment style. And then the Adesanya fight, remember going in? A lot of people were saying that Costa was going to knock him out and all this. And I remember being on the Adesanya side here, and I said, well, let's wait and see here, right? You know, let's see what happens. And it was Adesanya who was definitely the hammer in that one. Costa got dominated and he got finished in that fight. It's the only time that Costa's been finished in his career. So yeah, very big win there for Adesanya. Kind of an eye opener for Costa in terms of the skill set, I think, at that point, losing to Adesanya in that one. One other thing we got to mention with Uriah Hall, he was a member of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil Season 3. He did not end up winning the show. He lost to Marcio Alexandre Jr. in that one. But obviously was signed to the UFC shortly after that, a few fights later, 4 or 5 fights later. But yeah, I think people forget that he was on Top Brazil. The Costa Romero fight, I went back and looked at the scorecards for that one. That was back in August of 2019. I was at that card, actually, UFC 241, Cormier Miocic 2. 11 media members scoring the fight for Costa, but 9 media members scoring the fight for Yoel Romero. So kind of interesting there that some people did feel like Romero did enough to get it done. Now, Costa has had a number of layoffs in his career. We're going to go through them right now. From Johnny Hendricks to Uriah Hall, there was a 245-day layoff. Going from Uriah Hall to Yoel Romero, there was a 375-day layoff. Going from Romero to Adesanya, there was a 430-day layoff. Going from Adesanya to Vettori, there was a 392-day layoff. Going from Vettori to Rockhold, there was a 301-day layoff. And going from Rockhold to Whittaker, there's only a 175-day layoff. So this is one of the shortest layoffs he's had. But that's one thing that I think people forget. And you look at Costa's record and you wonder why he's only got 16 fights. It's because he doesn't fight that much. There's a variety of reasons for that. We'll get into that in a second. But yeah, not very active for Paulo Costa. So I mentioned the layoffs. Paulo Costa actually had a lot of issues as to why there's a lot of fights that didn't take place so close together. The Olawale Bamboze fight, for example, and this is a bunch of stuff I forgot about. I actually went back and looked it up. So after that fight, the UFC offered him a contract and Paulo Costa refused. They couldn't come to financial terms. Sound familiar? This is something we're still seeing in 2022 with Paulo Costa. And hey, all the power to him. Everyone should get paid fairly. But yeah, there was a contract issue there. So even though he fought in June, he did not fight Hendricks until November. So that was part of the reason that happened as well. He was supposed to fight Uriah Hall in the following year. There was a biceps injury there. Then he was supposed to fight Yoel Romero, and there was a fight that was supposed to take place in 2019 in April, actually. They don't have it listed here. He was supposed to fight Romero in April on the UFC on ESPN Plus 8 card. He was removed from the card due to an undisclosed reason. He was replaced by Jacare Souza. Then Romero pulled out of the fight due to pneumonia. Costa was scheduled to fight Costa, but then he had an issue with USADA. You remember this about the IVs? We find out that he was suspended 6 months due to using an IV. Remember, that was something the UFC banned. You cannot use IVs at all. There was that image that surfaced around. So he was out for 6 months there. So again, that's a reason as well why that did not take place. And then he was supposed to fight Robert Whittaker in April of 2021. This fight here, and there was an illness there that he couldn't take the fight. He's also supposed to fight Jared Cannonier. According to Costa, I'm just reading it here, he said there was never a bout agreement. Again, it might have been a contract issue there. So yeah, that's like, again, if you look at the fact that he's not been that active, there's been a variety of reasons: USADA, injuries, and contract issues. So those are sort of the 3 big things that we got to point out here if you're wondering why Paulo Costa has not been as active. Okay, let's get to the odds right now, shall we? Not every book has it up yet, again, because I mean, the UFC said the fight is happening. Paulo Costa saying he wants a new contract, all these different things. So from Costa's end, doesn't seem like it's official, but from everyone else, it does. But you can see there, Whittaker being a huge favorite here, minus 265. The comeback on Costa, plus 225 on a lot of books here. And I tend to agree with the odds here. I think this is Robert Whittaker's fight to lose. And someone got confused when I made this last time in the last early look show I did. What I mean by this is Robert Whittaker would have to make a big mistake in this fight to lose this fight, is kind of what I'm getting at. I really think this fight favors Robert Whittaker a lot. And saying that, I think Robert Whittaker beats most middleweights in the weight class. I think he's right there. I think The top middleweights are obviously the champ, Alex Pereira, and I know there's some questions about Pereira's, ground game and wrestling and all this stuff, but you've got Pereira, you've got Adesanya, you've got Whittaker. After that, there's a huge drop-off. Now, look, I know Costa's entertaining. I know Costa got a good win over Romero a few years ago, but Costa lost to Vettori in a fight that I think if Costa is supposedly one of the top 3 middleweights, he beats Vettori, and he didn't. Whereas Robert Whittaker, I mean, you can use a little MMA math here. You really can. Whittaker dominated Vettori. Costa didn't. Costa lost that fight, and he had some weight issues and all this. Not to mention the layoffs. Not to mention the way he looked against Adesanya. Now, look, you could say the same thing for Whittaker when he fought Adesanya the first time. He was completely outclassed. But I think we saw in that rematch that Whittaker is that damn good because he nearly beat Adesanya in the rematch. So kind of looking at it from that perspective, I just think Whittaker is levels above Paulo Costa. He's tough to finish. Again, only 1 knockout loss at middleweight. Could Costa knock out Whittaker? I suppose he's got a puncher's chance, but really, if you even look at Costa's last couple fights, like he couldn't even knock out a Luke Rockhold in his last fight. So I don't even know if that killer instinct from Costa is still there that we've seen early on in his career. So there's that. Whittaker, I think, is better on the ground. I think Whittaker's got better wrestling. Again, Whittaker's durable. Whittaker, in my opinion, has fought the better opposition. He's been, despite some of the layoffs that Whittaker's had, he's been more active in terms of his UFC career. He's got a lot more fights, right? We talked about it there. By the time Costa made his debut, Whittaker already had a number of fights. So that's something to consider as well. The other thing that's a bummer, and I know I rant about this on every early look show with a lot of these fights, this should be a 5-round fight. It's an important fight for the division. We've got a new champion right now. The winner of this very well could fight Pereira next if Adesanya wants to take some more time off. Who knows? But this absolutely should be a 5-round fight. Now, the fact that it's 3 rounds, I think to some degree does favor Costa a little bit, only because I think Costa hits a little bit harder. And he's also a guy that, I mean, the 5 rounds, how's he going to do in 5 rounds? I don't know. We haven't even really seen him go 5 rounds, whereas Whittaker has. I think if it's 5 rounds, favors Whittaker more because, the cardio sort of benefits him. But either way, I just don't see Robert Whittaker losing this fight. I think Whittaker wins. I think the only question in this fight, really, from Whittaker's end is can he finish Paulo Costa? And I believe he can. However, I don't think that's the most likely outcome here. I think Whittaker wins the decision. Now, here's why. Whittaker has not finished an opponent since Jacare. And even then, Jacare was getting a little older. Before that was Brunson. Brunson's been knocked out a number of times here. Costa's only been knocked out 1 time. If I'm laying my bets here, I'm thinking Whittaker's likely winning a decision here. And I don't think we have the prop up yet, but I'm willing to bet that it's a lot better. Well, I know for a fact it's going to be a lot better than minus 265 because I do think that's a little steep, but there's certain fighters that I will not bet against, and Robert Whittaker is one of them, unless he's fighting maybe Pereira or Adesanya. But I think Whittaker's right there with Adesanya and Alex Pereira. I think he's right there, and I don't think Costa is. And maybe this is a fight where Costa surprises us and he looks better, and maybe he rises to the occasion, but I can't bet on that. I can't bank on that in this fight. To me, it's Robert Whittaker by decision all day. Not only do I think he'll get a decision, I think he'll dominate the fight. I think this will be very much like the Marvin Vettori fight where Costa can't do anything and Whittaker controls the entire fight. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do any of you like Paulo Costa here? Seriously, like I normally don't say this, but I would be very surprised to see people picking Costa over Whittaker. I feel like Whittaker is better everywhere here. Again, maybe Costa has a little bit more power, but outside of that, I just don't see him beating Robert Whittaker. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. While you're there, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. And if there's any other fights you want me to preview in the coming months, like again, we like doing these early, let me know in the comments. All the main events I'll be covering, obviously. Any title fights I'll be covering, obviously. Any popular fighters I'll be covering, obviously. But I'm going to do more of these over the holidays just because of the fact that, there's not a lot of fights to do pros picks on. So I want to give you guys some extra content, and I figure why not do the early look show instead. Let's discuss this fight. Let's talk about this. I want to hear from you in the comments. I'm James Lynch, like I mentioned off the top. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll